Bases dropped on a beautiful Tuesday morning in Atlanta, Georgia. SDH live for July 16th. Jason Longshore, John Nelson here with you to kick things off. Joe Patrick from Dirty South Soccer and 92.9 The Game will be joining us in just a bit. But, John, we didn't get a chance on yesterday's Overreaction Monday edition to go through what happened over the weekend in Major League Soccer. So let's kick it off there. And let's go back chronologically from Friday. First game Friday night was a 2-2 draw, D.C. and New England. New England jumped out to a 2-0 lead. D.C. came back. They got a red card on Zahibo that helped them along the way. What did you learn from D.C. and New England?
Well, I learned that never doubt Jason Longshore when he's referring to Prize Picks and Carlos Gil, first and foremost.
Carlos Gil.
That too, yes.
Yes.
And what we're seeing with New England is there's that fire that's lighted under you when you've got a new guy in charge and you're having to prove yourself all over again. And you're seeing what we thought we could see on a regular basis from a guy like Teal Bunbury. And what you'd like to see on a regular basis from a guy from Carlos Gil. But you get your moments where, once again, Schleprock comes back at you, and then Zahibo ends up with the red, and then they're trying to hang on. And so you're seeing flashes with...
That's not Schleprock for New England. They didn't get negative. They didn't get, sad or...
No. What I'm saying is that there's that you get the moments where it ends up, it's like, okay, what you've anticipated with New England in the past strangely happens again. And instance,
I disagree.
Okay, fine.
It's not that New England, forgot how to play, they forgot how to play for most of the first part of the season. That. No, you are. It didn't turn into what New England was before. It's a 2-0 lead from Bunbury and then Carlos Gil. And then it's an outstanding goal to cut it in half. Areola with a cross, Leonardo Jara with the volley on the backside. Great goal, 2-1 at halftime. Then New England gets a red card. Then you're battling, you're trying to hold on, and it's another great goal. It's a free kick from Rooney that Amarikwa takes out of the air and puts in the back of the net. I don't think New England has really much to feel that bad about here, so I disagree with Schleprock.
My whole perspective on it is that from what we've seen with New England, regardless of who's been in charge the last couple of seasons, you're always waiting for that moment that snatches something from a positive that turns it something that's not as positive. And the Zahibo red card for me was that moment, and it seems that you're waiting for something else to happen, and it ends up being a 2-2 draw as opposed to a 2-1 win. That was my point.
Yeah, this is different, though. This is not the Schleprock moments we've seen from New England in the past where things just fall apart. This didn't feel like that to me. So I don't think this is, same old New England. It really didn't give me that vibe at all. I think the Revs are, if you'd offered them a 2-2 draw coming into the day, they would have taken it.
I'd have taken it.
And I don't think they're going to feel awful by giving up a pretty late goal with 10 men. And 2 good goals you gave up. It wasn't like you gave up bad goals. So, no, I think it's, honestly, I look the other way at D.C. a little bit, and how can you start that badly?
Really?
At home, how can you start that badly? It's got to be better for D.C. So, if coming out of this, for me, there's more questions about the home team than the away team. What do you make of Bruce Arena's comments afterwards, though, about D.C. and not embracing their history and... he didn't really have any emotional feeling coming to Audi Field. That was interesting.
Yeah. And I think that for me, when you see stuff like that, you are, for me, I look at it as, all right, I'm trying to motivate my new side, and I'm trying to wrap myself in the flag of the Revs. And more power to Bruce Arena for saying those kinds of things. Honestly, with the way that things were for him in the past. I know that you have this idea in your head about the past of DC United, but you've left that. You've gone into a new building, and that new building doesn't have any representation of the past in it. There aren't any banners. There isn't a wall of fame. There aren't any of those bells or whistles that are links to the past. So, I mean, I can see where he's coming from in that regard, but I also see that from my perspective as Bruce Arena sitting there and saying, okay, I'm the coach of the Revs. I'm coaching my guys. I'm here with this franchise now. And if there's something that I can point out that kind of, needle my old side a little bit, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, if he'd said it before the game, I'd be with you on that. I think Bruce is just being Bruce, and I don't think he's necessarily wrong. It feels kind of sterile,
antiseptic.
It's there, and with a club, New England doesn't really have a lot of history to celebrate, and they started the same time that DC did. So Arena talking about this is kind of funny because I think you've got an Open Cup and you've got a Superliga title if you're New England. That's about it. You've got legendary players in the league. You've got a lot of trophies if you're DC United, and it does kind of feel like that's a separate club, and it shouldn't. So
where's the celebration of guys like Echeverry?
Well, it's not. It's fine in the balance. I mean, you don't want to live in the past, but
no,
you gotta do and have something, and they do some things. There are things that DC United's done that I've seen that they'll have players back and they'll honor them at halftime and stuff like that. That's okay, but I saw way too many DC fans and folks agree with what Bruce Arena said, and that's the problem. That's the scary part. So hopefully DC United was listening and they find a way to, not just react to what Bruce Arena had to say after a 2-2 draw, but actually
just give me a ring of honor. Just put names on the bunting or something like they do in places like Buffalo for football, or have that kind of a reveal or
clubs
that kind
like that.
of
Clubs like DC
idea.
have the history to do that, and that's a big part of it. It's one of the main knocks that a lot of people want to throw is that, you have no history, you're plastic, blah blah blah. Well, DC has history, and they have a great history, and they should be celebrating it, and it should be an instrumental part of the club, and we'll see if maybe they can start to figure out how to do that in a better way. Houston, 3-1 losers at home to LAFC. And the storyline coming in was LAFC losing in the Open Cup 48 hours earlier to Portland, rotating their lineup heavily, and a barrage from the Dynamo in the early going. Romel Kyoto, third-minute goal. Ellis had already hit the post in the first 30 seconds. And Houston could have had a couple more in the first half. They don't, and that comes back to bite them because Adama Diomande gets one in first half stoppage time, gets another 4 minutes into the second half, and it's all LAFC from there. Diego Rossi puts it away in the 88th minute. It's a bad loss for the Dynamo, who are now outside of the playoff picture.
Yeah, I think for me the only thing missing was Cisniega starting instead of Tyler Miller. I mean, you look at the starting 11, and, of course, I will raise my hand and let everybody know that I started Carlos Vela in my fantasy team brought to us by the Jason Wright Agency. I started Carlos Vela, and I captained him. Pretty much.
This is what happens when we don't have a fantasy segment and I don't get to help you.
See? This is what I'm saying. Jakovic, Elmanir, Beta, Blackman, Lee Win, Mark Anthony K, who I think should have, at the very least, been on an orange card at one point. Vassell, Dio, Josh Perez, and Zelaya. That's your starting 11. You bring in Segura, Diego Rossi, and Latif Blessing, and Rossi gets the one goal in his 35 minutes. But yeah, that 11, getting the result that they did in Houston, that to me is taking Dynamo from DEFCON 3 to DEFCON 4 heading into the match here midweek.
Yeah, it makes Wednesday's match even more interesting because the Dynamo are in a rough spot. Another home team who got out to a hot start and then couldn't hold it, LA Galaxy, in the return of the Cali Clasico. San Jose won the first one up north. They win the second one down south, 3-1. Rolf Felcher, second-minute goal. Galaxy are looking pretty good early, and then Vaco took over in the second half. He opens the scoring for the Quakes in the 61st. He creates the goal for Danny Houston in the 64th. They're up 2-1. And then Jackson Ewell puts it away, 85th minute volley off a Vaco shot and save. Galaxy started out hot, but they ended up with only 5 shots, 1 on target. Other side of it looks a lot like the first leg of the Cali Classico. 32 shots for San Jose, 16 on target. It could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you read those numbers and put them out there. 30. I mean, just the sheer bulk of the matter. 32 shots for the Quakes, half of them on target. Half of them. And you're sitting there, half, I get that. But 32 shots and half of them on target. So, hey, I think that really if you're looking at LAG right now, I would have reason to be seriously concerned about things in a very high-powered West. And I think that for me, Matias Almeida, number 1 candidate right now for Coach of the Year in the league.
No question, Matias Almeida's Coach of the Year. Just no question at all. I mean, give him the award right now. It's been that good. And keep an eye on the Quakes. They keep finding ways to get better, and when you're getting these types of contributions from guys like Vaco, they're not going anywhere. Let's move on to another rivalry match in Canada on Saturday night. Toronto 2-0 winners on the road in Montreal. Not a ton to get into here. It's a pretty controlling performance from Toronto. Alejandro Pozuelo, 61st minute. Josie Altidore in stoppage time on a free kick. Bradley and Altidore return to Toronto, and they take care of business.
And, I'm not going to put this into, how we've discussed Montreal this season, and we've had the different versions of Montreal of, good Montreal and then Kansas City Montreal. This one, to me, it was just one of those workmanlike performances by Toronto, and they got the 2 goals on the board. And I continue to be impressed with Jacob Schaffelberg and seeing how he has become integrated into that starting 11 for Greg Vanney. So looking at the younger talent and seeing how it's coming along, in addition to Omar Gonzalez putting in 90 for Toronto FC as well. So quality win and in a rivalry match. Quentin Westberg in between the sticks is still the hot hand right now for in goal for Toronto FC.
Yeah, Westberg made a big save late on Maxi Urruti to keep the 1-0 lead. Then Altidore puts it away. A home win in Central Florida. Orlando 1-0 over the Crew. Not the most exciting of matches. You also had some weirdness late. Benji Michel, 84th minute goal, his first. No shots on target until then, 84th minute. Each team finished with 1 shot on target. Orlando only finished with 4 shots, period. The biggest storyline coming out of it's probably Dom Dwyer, who gets a red card for a pretty nasty elbow to Josh Williams' head. And Williams is listed as out with a concussion for tomorrow's match. Just no excuse for Dom Dwyer in that moment.
How many people from just in general conversations that you've had over, say, the last year and a half are tired of Dom Dwyer in general?
I think go ask Orlando fans, and I think they're tired of it. And that's the most important thing here is it doesn't matter what the rest of the league thinks. When you're just, I don't know, when you're more known at this stage for these moments, for this one, for picking the fight with Montreal earlier this season and flopping and all of that nonsense, when that's what people are talking about and not scoring goals, you're out of whack. It's just all wrong for you at this stage. And I don't know what's happened with Dwyer. I honestly have no idea, because this is a guy who in 2017 was scoring goals, big trade, scoring goals for the national team, looking like a player who could be factoring into the national team more. And from there until now, it's been 2 years, and it's just a completely different story.
Quinn agrees about Dom Dwyer.
Yeah, she's frustrated with Dom Dwyer throwing elbows so much.
And Columbus just continues to give Caleb Porter aneurysms on a weekly basis.
Columbus just isn't very good, and
Nope.
And I didn't think they would be like this. I thought it would take Porter a little bit of time to get the team the way he wanted, and there'd probably have to be some roster changes, but did not expect to see them level with Cincinnati at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. And the reason they are level with Cincinnati is Cincinnati went to Chicago and won. We talked about it. Chicago had matches with Cincinnati and Columbus coming up. They needed 6 points out of it, or you've got to start asking some serious questions about what the future is in Chicago. And they lost to Cincinnati, and they gave up a goal in the first minute. And when you're giving up these early goals, there were a lot of early goals this week. When you're giving up these early goals in must-win games, yeah. Nicolas Gaetan missed a penalty midway through the first half.
Missed two?
That's what I was getting to. He had the second one saved, but he puts in the rebound, and it's 1-1 in stoppage time of the first half. And you think, okay, Chicago's going to come out in the second half and handle their business and get the win. And, yeah, they had to work a little harder, but not so much. They couldn't find a second goal, and Cincinnati did, and it's Fernando Adi getting his first goal for Cincinnati. Look, the visitors came in. They had 6 shots. They had 3 on target. They didn't really have much of the ball, 40%, but they did enough, and they beat Chicago in Bridgeview. And the Fire, I don't know what's next for them. I don't know what they should be looking at, because now they are 4 points back from Toronto in the final playoff spot. Toronto, Orlando, and New England, who are all ahead of them by varying degrees of points, have a game in hand. And if you look further up, NYC is 7 points ahead. They have 3 games in hand on Chicago. It's looking bleak for the Fire.
Yeah. And getting into the numbers again, like we did with Cali Classico. The Fire, 20 shots, 7 on target. Cincinnati, 6 shots, 3 on target. And if you haven't seen it, the video that popped up on social media from Fernando Adi's house with, I want to say it was his young daughter watching Daddy score. I thought that was a really cool release on social media. But I'm just going to continue to say until further notice, hell is real and hell is Ohio soccer right now, but a good win on the road for Yohan Demay.
Yeah, it's hell right now because they're both at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. It's bad soccer right now. It's awful. Good soccer was played up in Minnesota. 1-0 win for the Loons. Stoppage time goal from Mason Toy. 2 pretty evenly matched teams. Dallas had the possession battle. They had a few more shots than Minnesota, but they didn't dominate. They couldn't find a way through. The game finished with fireworks. It's Toy pouncing on the rebound. Jesse Gonzalez with a really good save on Jan Gregush. Then Vito Mannone, who was the man of the match up until this point, commits a foul in the box, gives up a penalty, but then he saves Reto Ziegler, and Minnesota takes 3 points.
Watching the tail end of this one, I wasn't all that sure that the foul was inside the box. It goes to VAR. It was determined that it was either on the line or just inside through a shoulder.
It was inside the box.
And a lot of folks, I'm sure, overseas are wondering where this Vito Mannone was when he was with Sunderland. And I was one of the people, I will stand up and admit, that when Mannone was signed with Minnesota United, I gave it the eyebrow. I'm like, really? You're signing Vito Mannone? And it's moments like this where Adrian Heath and the front office are proven better than me, and that's why I'm talking about it, and that's why they're playing it and getting paid far more money than I am when it comes to discussing the sport.
Real Salt Lake, big win against Philadelphia, 4-0 at Rio Tinto. Jefferson Savarino, 2 goals and an assist. Philadelphia, 5 shots, 0 on target. Surprising dominance out of RSL.
And another moment where a player that I placed on my fantasy roster was not discussed with you before the fantasy roster was revealed, in Jack Elliott. So when your backline gives up 4, that really doesn't bode well for the amount of points that you'd be getting.
Yeah, that was a bad decision.
And RSL, it's for me, it's the continual discussion of which RSL team are you going to get on a weekly basis, and it is literally the three faces of Eve of MLS. And you get good RSL this time, and you put 4 in the back of the net. And you've talked about Jefferson Severino all season long, and we've had discussions about good RSL, and this was one of the reasons why he is definitely worth the spot shadow when he's being discussed. But yeah, 4 on the board, and this one completely shocked me. I will go ahead and say it, that I did not anticipate this as a result.
There's a team, Sporting Kansas City, that is starting to get healthy, and they're showing it. 3-0 win in Vancouver. They're not all the way back. They don't have everybody back yet, but a dominant performance at BC Place. It opened with an Ali Adnan own goal in the 24th minute, but Sporting Kansas City made them pay. Felipe Gutierrez, 56th minute, Gersho, 90th minute, and Vancouver is just those matches that they were getting draws earlier. They're starting to turn into losses.
And the roster, the 11 that you put out there, if you're Sporting, didn't have Johnny Russell in it. Johnny Russell was a latest of late subs. And you're seeing, in this particular match, you got 90 minutes out of Batan Barat, your back line of Barat, Zusi, Matt Beasler, and Sanovic. But, for me, you look at a Gerso, you look at a Felipe Gutierrez, you got 65 out of Zalalem. And Sporting, for me, I have learned never to doubt Peter Vermes. Doesn't matter what part of the season, doesn't matter how shorthanded they may or may not be. I've always sat there and said, okay, Peter Vermes knows what he's doing, and by the time that the discussion is at the end, Sporting will be in that discussion. So quality win for them on the road, and more power to them. Not a surprise.
Match of the week might have been in Portland. Portland Timbers, Colorado Rapids, 2-2 draw. Pretty wild one, back and forth all over the place. Tommy Smith with one of the greatest own goals you'll ever see to give Portland the lead. I mean, just a beautiful header with power and placement in the wrong goal. It didn't get the Rapids down, though. Jonathan Lewis goes down the other way and gets a goal a minute later. So you're back square. You're 1-1. Then Diego Valeri from the spot in the 63rd. That was a few minutes after Julio Cascante got a straight red card for a really bad challenge on Kai Kamara at midfield. Just go straight through the back of him. No reason at all to try to play that the way he did. So Portland, 10 men, but 2-1 up until Sam Nicholson scores one of the goals of the week. It's an outstanding cut in from the right side to the left and beats the goalkeeper. Steve Clark, who'd had a great night. Ton of saves from Clark, 6 on the night, but he's unable to keep that one out, and it ends up 2-2, and the Connor Casey effect continues on.
And for some strange reason, the interim tag has not been removed, has it not?
No.
I mean, it's another quality effort from the guys in Colorado on the road in one of the toughest environments in the league. And I scratch my head and wonder, okay, why has the interim tag not been removed? For me, this is a quality result for a team.
No. Let's make it clear. I don't think you're not giving Connor Casey the job after 10 games. But you just say that the interim tag is going to stay there for the rest of the season. They haven't said that. I don't think you should hire him yet. You think they should just give him the job after a nice run?
No, I'm saying that this season, lock the season down, pull the tag off for this season, or however you want to phrase it.
It's semantics. Yeah. I mean, he's still an interim. Go ahead and say, look, we're going to finish the year out. We're not going to be looking for anybody. That's what they need to say. It's not taking the interim tag off. That means you're hiring the guy. And I don't know if you need to do that yet. But let's get real about what Connor Casey's done with this team. It's mostly the same team. He's added Jonathan Lewis, but 5 wins, 1 loss, 3 draws since May 20th. And the Rapids are... they're 9 points back. It's going to take a run like that the rest of the way for them.
But still.
But it's a great turnaround, and there's no need to be going to find somebody right now because you kind of are who you are. If Connor Casey gets you into the playoffs, then give him the job. He's earned it. But you don't have to go rush and hire somebody right now. It's not about the interim tag. It's just you don't need to be looking right now. You can look for off-season and build it if you want to make that decision then. And you can sit down and maybe learn if Casey's the guy in the long term. I don't know if he is yet, but it's been pretty good so far, so let him finish it out. Final game before we get to Joe Patrick, who's going to join us in our next segment. Red Bulls and NYC, 2-1 win for the Red Bulls. NYC not happy at all after throw-in gate.
Oh.
Hashtag throw-in gate. NYC opened the scoring, 7th minute, Hebert. 46th minute, first half stoppage time, Daniel Royer. 60th minute, Royer with a second one, and that's where it got a little crazy. The Colonel had a comment yesterday that we were going to hold. Do you have it handy, or are we going to hold it for later in the show?
Let's hold it for later.
Okay, let's hold it. We'll get into throw-in gate later because there's lots of odds and ends to it, and there's lots of comments that are rather spicy. We'll get into all that in just a bit, but we're going to get Joe Patrick from Dirty South Soccer and 92.9 The Game on right after this. We'll be right back.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here, July 16th, Tuesday Thoughts edition of the show. You can join in the conversation. Tweet at us at Soccer Down here. We'll get to your Tuesday thoughts in a bit. Joe Patrick's always got Tuesday thoughts, and sometimes they do revolve around soccer and not baseball. What's up, Joe?
That's right, yeah. A lot more baseball thoughts entering the brain recently, but yeah, good to be back on the show. It's been a while. Schedule's always in flux right now, so thanks for making time for me.
Can I ask a quick Braves question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have not been paying super close attention. I, see kind of what the vibe is on Twitter and all kinds of stuff. I was honestly shocked because I see I don't even know what word is appropriate here for what I see on Twitter. Vitriol would be the one I would probably go with. And then I look at the record and I'm like, what? I did not think they were as good as they are based off what people say about them.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. There's the Tiger Woods memes are still up, They're still ranting and raving about the bullpen, even though they have the lowest bullpen ERA in baseball this season, or in the National League at least.
Never known that.
Yeah, it's just these These are sports fans. It's something Nick said it yesterday on your show. He said that the ranting and raving about people not renewing their season tickets or whatever. It's like, well, you're a sports fan. That's just what we do. So that's the job.
I got to pay closer attention to what you're saying about the Braves because they're doing far better than I thought they were.
Yeah, it's been a fun season for sure.
Now they just need another veteran arm to go with Dallas Keuchel to get him into the postseason. Since you've got 2 weeks of trade window left available for anybody having to clear waivers.
See, John knows.
Yeah, see, he pays more attention than I do.
Madison Bumgarner.
We'll see about that one. It's an interesting correlation between the two, though, because you have the Braves with a couple weeks left in the trade window. You have Atlanta United with about 3 weeks left in the transfer window, and it's sounding like Atlanta's going to have to go out into the market. It sounds like they have gone out in the market. We haven't had an official announcement yet after Paul Tenorio's Bomba de Tenorio last night about Mo Adams, but the injury situation at outside back has become a crisis at this point.
Yeah, no, it's really bad, and when you look at the left back, obviously now you're probably missing Breck Shea for the rest of the season. You have another guy in Florentine Pogba who has shown he can play over there pretty effectively, but you don't really know how much you can get out of him physically. Just seeing him play in games on the training ground, you can just tell he's a guy that can't load too many minutes on that body. He's probably the biggest guy physically on the team, and that just means more mass to move around, and that's going to be tougher on the body. So you can't really push him too hard, and unfortunately Atlanta United's schedule requires players to be pushed very, very hard. So, you definitely have a shortage there right now, and you have to try to find some options, and I don't know if they're, super evident right now of where those answers are going to come from. You look at a guy, you could possibly bring up a Guillermo Benitez or something from Atlanta United 2 on a short-term loan if you need a guy for a game, but for a longer-term solution, I think you're going to need to go out and see what's available on the market. So, and same goes for right back as well. You have Franco Escobar, but then you don't really have a ton of depth behind him in that position either. I think that this week you'll probably see Atlanta United using every fullback they have in the game. You'll probably have possibly Mikey Ambrose and Parkhurst out as your fullbacks this week.
And we've had questions this morning going back to this past weekend, and folks, and I'll just take Shiva's tweet and bring it to the floor for both of you. Shiva wondering why, and she's still thinking why there wasn't out more rotation against Seattle, and she mentions Carlton, Brandon Vasquez, Dion Pereira could have all started. PT could have used a break, in my opinion. Joe, when you looked at that starting 11/18 that showed up in Seattle this past weekend, what were you thinking with schedule compression and everything happening as it is right now?
Well, I wasn't surprised at all. I think that Frank DeBoer started his best possible team, against the Sounders, as you should, against a big Western Conference opponent. I think what I was most surprised by was how strong the team he played against St. Louis FC in the week building up to that game, and not just the team that he put out there, the 11 guys that he put out there to start, but how long they played in that game. I don't think that DeBoer made a substitution until maybe into past the 80th minute or just before the 80th minute, something around there. So, he pushed those guys most of the game. And granted, it was one of those games where you had control and, you weren't doing a ton of running. But I think that, right now there's not a whole lot of options you're going to. Like, a lot of the players that are playing right now are depth options, but they are also your best options right now because of all the injuries you're dealing with. You look at guys like, Justin Miram came in, and I'm sure that he came in and they thought he would be, a kind of a guy who can come in off the bench for you, give you a spark late in games, kind of be one of those depth pieces. And right now he's been one of your key players because, you need him. You don't have other bodies to put out there. So I think we're really kind of seeing Atlanta's squad tested to its limits more so than we've ever seen before. And I think that, there's lots of reasons for that. Obviously, the schedule compression, all the international stuff has had its effect on this team, and it's a challenge that Frank DeBoer is dealing with this season that I don't think Tata Martino ever really had to deal with to this extent.
Yeah, this has felt larger than we've seen in the past, and there's a bunch of reasons for it. The international play for sure at the beginning, just the format of MLS's schedule this year. And I saw you tweet about it. It's something I've questioned from day one since this came out. You know, compressing the schedule this way, they halfway said that it's about 2022 and the World Cup being in the winter. They also came up with a bunch of other reasons. It's really changed the competition this year, and it's had a huge effect on the quality of some matches.
Yeah, look, I encourage anybody just go look at Atlanta United's schedule and just look at the days they're playing these games. I mean, you're playing literally weekend, midweek, all through May, and then also all through basically the latter part of June through middle of August. I mean, there could be more games out of that schedule if the team advances to, U.S. Open Cup final, there's obviously playoffs that could happen. So, there's just tons of games, and it's really, it's tough because one, you can't possibly get the same physical level from the players when you're playing, when they have to play that often. Which is, bad for the fans because you're not seeing the best product possible available on the field. And then, also, you're just, it's asking a lot, I think, for fans to come out to so many midweek games. It's just crazy, and I feel like, it's just a shame. It's just a shame that, it's kind of worked out this way. And obviously, scheduling is very, very difficult. I totally understand that. And there are certain circumstances around Atlanta United, specifically this season, with them playing in all these competitions, CONCACAF Champions League and whatnot, that have kind of forced, some of this to happen to an extent. But yeah, it's just, I think, this squad is really feeling the effects of it, and they need some of these guys to return from injury just so that some of the current guys can start getting, getting some breaks here and there, because, the physical stress level that these guys have been put under is pretty remarkable.
Then you get into who we've been able to see because of roster rotation. And one of the guys that really has stepped in since he showed up here is Justin Meram. And I want to get your feedback on what you've been able to see about bringing in a veteran presence for basically the loose change and lint that Darren Eales had in his pockets. And you're seeing someone who has really made himself at home here in the offense for Atlanta United.
Yeah, I think it was a great move. The way I kind of see the Meram acquisition was basically you're trading Romario Williams for Justin Meram, and I think that that's exactly what I can't speak for Columbus if they kind of it benefited them to kind of get a seasoned veteran off their books and get more of a prospect in to try to build him. But I think for Atlanta, it's exactly what they needed. They didn't really need a prospect type like Romario Williams. They needed someone who could come in and contribute in multiple ways, play on either side of, the left or the right, kind of be a versatile piece. And obviously he's been a productive piece. It's been great to see him come in. And I think he's had some of his best moments since his great season for Columbus. And what was that, 2015 or 16 when he scored like double-digit goals. But he's been fantastic. And, last week, Chris Vermeister wrote about this toward the end of last week. We got to speak to him. He was kind of overshadowed on the whole Pity Martinez media day last week. But, he really just credited the locker room here and just the atmosphere here. It's one that, players can come in and slot in. It's very easy to kind of find your feet at this club and, get going. And you might think it's the opposite for, a quote-unquote big club, at least relative to this league, for players to come in and find that comfort. But I think that, just with the facilities here, all the staff that's in place to help to get these players set up, whether it's dealing with, getting them set up in homes or whatnot. I think just everything here is suitable for these players to come in, find their feet very quickly and be able to produce. And I think we're seeing exactly that from Justin Meram.
So we've seen it with Meram, and you mentioned Pity Martinez, so let's go ahead and go there. I haven't talked to you about the whole thing last week. With first, Pity was rumored to be going back to River, then it was an interview with Argentine radio, then the media day on Friday. I mean, where are you on the whole Pity Martinez saga right now?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack in it. I think first of all, I don't think Pitti really helped himself with doing the interview. That said, I understand why he did it. I understand the frustration he probably felt. And I think that Frank DeBoer deserves some criticism for the way that, for being a little too honest about what he thought about Pitti Martinez's performance in the media. As a media member myself, of course, I like to hear his honest opinion on things, but I think that, Pitti Martinez probably, has a point saying that, maybe some things you don't say out loud all the time. But apparently this is just a Dutch thing where they're just very honest. And when you ask a question, they answer it as truthfully and straightforward as they can. On the whole, I think that it's an ordeal that was blown out of proportion. I think that, the Argentine media that was publishing the tweets before the full audio had been released, when they were just posting the blurbs about I would rather be in River and stuff like that. I kind of liken that quote was very salacious and it was not representative of what he said in the full context, which I I consider the same way that people talk about how they wish they were still in college, when they're kind of, especially in their first few years in the workforce, kind of, reminiscing about the good old times. Not to say that they actually wish they were still there, but, they just kind of, it's just nostalgic. And that's kind of the way that the way I took of what he said.
There's a feeling about that too with Argentine clubs. And I don't I don't think people necessarily grasp that. I mean, it's an understood part of being an Argentine player when you come up at clubs there. If you're of quality, you're going to leave. And you're going to leave for, a variety of reasons. And I think Pitti hits kind of a couple of those on the checklist. More money and more security and also a greater chance to go to an even bigger club. And the other one is to make your club money. That's a huge part of it. We've talked about it many times with Tito Villalba. Knowing he's going to leave San Lorenzo, could have left on a free. He signed a new deal. So San Lorenzo was going to make some money on the deal. Barco, part of the thing about him leaving Independiente the way he did was to maximize how much money they made on the deal. That's just the economics of the Argentine game. So Pitti needed to leave for River Plate's sake as much as for his own sake.
Yeah, I mean, I think it says a lot when you've heard these rumors about him going to River Plate, and then you also hear that River Plate have no money to with which to buy him.
They can't afford
or to
a
acquire
$5 million player from the Middle East right now that they want.
Right, exactly, and considering that Atlanta just bought Pitti for $12 million or however much it was, you would think that they should have money. But these clubs need that revenue to kind of keep the wheels turning, keep the lights on. But I think as far as it goes with him, I think that I think a lot of these players, when, they consider those clubs as like family members, it's like leaving your family. And so it's just very nostalgic for these guys. And I don't blame him, Pitti at all for, having those feelings about River. So on the good news is on the field, I thought he had probably one of his best performances I've seen from him so far this season, against Seattle. I thought he looked super lively. I thought basically all of Atlanta United's best attacks went through him, whether it was him, hitting a long diagonal that led to something or him being in the final third, getting into dangerous areas. He wasn't really able to kind of capitalize on some of those situations, but, he looked lively. He looked quick. I just thought it was a really good performance to see, especially considering what had happened earlier in the week.
How much of a street fight do you anticipate the East being for the second half of the season? Because, I mean, you're looking, Jason and I talked about it last night, and thank you once again for listening last night, where you could see Atlanta United first, you could see them fifth or sixth. I mean, what are you anticipating when it comes to the East here in the second half of the season?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a battle of attrition for everybody. We've talked about it with Atlanta United has struggled with it so far with the injuries they've had to deal with. But I think that it's so hard to predict at this point. These teams are so close from a talent perspective that I'm not going to go out there and make a prediction on like who's going to finish first in the East and whatnot. I think that I don't foresee this Atlanta United team finishing first in the East. I just don't see that as something that's realistic, especially when you have these apples hanging in front of you like the U.S. Open Cup. There's going to be kind of things they need to prioritize, or in my opinion, they should be prioritizing maybe in front of league matches, although it's very rare that that's the case. But I think you're in a very rare circumstance here with the U.S. Open Cup, where winning that cup not only gives you silverware, but it kind of achieves one of the club's goals, which is to be a regular participant in CONCACAF Champions League. So it's almost like, it's like a European team fighting for that top 4 spot, almost like an English team.
Spoken like a Spurs fan.
Exactly. Yeah. But anyway, and obviously the schedule is not going to really get much easier for this team in terms of the compression. So, I think it's going to continue to be a battle of attrition. But that said, I think that there's every chance that this team could find its form, by the time the playoffs start. I don't think that this team is going to be shooting for trying to top the Eastern Conference. I mean, of course they will, right? But at the same time, I think that's what they'll say. But I don't think that it's really in their hearts. I think what's in their hearts is to try to win U.S. Open Cup and then just try to get this team as prepped as possible for the playoffs, because, it's now we have these single game eliminations and anything can happen. So it doesn't really matter what you did in the regular season. A team like LAFC could play one bad game in the playoffs and get knocked out, and everything kind of goes for naught. So I think that this team will just really be focused on trying to prime themselves as best as possible once the playoffs come around.
I'm with you on all that. I think that's where the season is at this point. It's Open Cup first, and it's build and get ready for the postseason that will start in about 3 months. What's the number one thing in your mind that has to change for this team to have postseason success?
I mean, they have to figure out how to control the center of the park. It's something that they've really struggled with, in my opinion, ever since they came back from this international break. I just feel like, with Darlington Nagbe and Eric Remedi, they just haven't been the same. And it's something that worries me, especially when you look at a player as consistent as Eric Remedi, who's been in some poor form here. It worries me, and it worries me because I don't think it's just him having some bad games. I think that it means that there's some structural issues around him that are causing him to be this way. And so I think it just seems very open in midfield right now. It seems like there are big gaps. It's just too much space for 2 players to try to cover, or even 3 players to try to cover at times. I think you're looking at, pretty big gaps between the back line and the central midfielders. And so I just think they need to get that tightened up. And if they can get that tightened up, they can start to control games more and try to play the game on their terms like they did earlier in the season. I know a lot of people said that at the time that it was boring soccer or whatever, but I think that what you saw at that point was a team that could control the flow of the match for the most part. And it just hasn't seemed like they've been able to do that so far in most of the games since they've returned to play in late June here. So if they can get back to that, I think they'll have the talent coming back into the team with Tito and Barco to be able to score enough goals. They really need to just lock things down and kind of regain that strong identity they had in the first half of the season.
Yeah, it feels like that's been lost since the international break, and maybe Mo Adams' acquisition might have a little to do with that.
Yeah, potentially. I think that I'm intrigued by Mo Adams coming into this team because I think he presents a profile of player that this team doesn't have as a very mobile, ball-winning midfielder. He's a guy, if you look at his advanced metrics, he puts in a ton of defensive actions. He's not good on the ball. He's not going to, he's not the kind of guy who's going to, make incisive passes. He might even struggle, just help the team maintain possession. But I don't think you're acquiring someone like him for what he can do on the ball. You're acquiring him to run around and help reestablish some of that identity that we've talked about that's kind of been lost. So I'm intrigued if he does end up coming to Atlanta United.
Yeah, and you're getting him on a Generation Adidas deal, too, where he is very cost-effective in that regard. And I don't know if he would graduate the Generation Adidas program after this season. Miles Robinson stayed in it for 3 years. He will graduate it. I'm not sure if Adams will, because I don't know if he's played enough. It's an interesting move. You've got a lot to do today over at the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta Training Ground, so we'll let you go. Make sure you're following J.A. Patrick 200 for all the latest as Frank DeBoer. And who else is speaking to the media this afternoon?
They haven't even announced it, or maybe they have earlier, but it was not on the schedule that they emailed out. So we'll see. I will just leave you guys with one quick nugget. Andrew Carlton is training with the first team. I can see over in the distance. So there's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Carlton was with the twos in New York, started that one that did not go well, and an 8-1 loss the Red Bulls to. Gordon Wild made the trip to Seattle. I thought that might have been reversed going into it.
Yeah.
We'll see how the week looks.
Yep.
Joe, appreciate it. Thanks for the time, man. We appreciate checking in with us, and we'll get you back on very soon when it does not conflict with the Braves.
Sounds good. Let's definitely do that. Appreciate it.
Talk to Joe soon. Thanks, man. And we were going to take a quick break here, come back and wrap up hour number 1 right after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. SDH, July 16th, wrapping up hour number 1. And let's get to the Colonel's comment about hashtag throw-in-gate.
Throw-in-gate. All right, this is the Colonel, and it was in line with last night's show. Law 15, quote, a throw-in is awarded when the whole of the ball passes over the touchline. Law 6 has guidance on how to signal throw-in. IFAB practical guidelines for match officials says whistle not required for throw-in. Nice finish by Royer! Exclamation point. Overreaction Monday.
No, Colonel. I mean, you're there with Alan Kelly in the CYA point of it. When we get into referees, I feel like we so often can talk about it on two levels because it's what the laws of the game state and it's what actually plays out. Laws of the game, yeah, 100%. It's a goal. Whenever the AR puts their flag up or signals something, it's not the true decision. The center referee makes the decision. In this case, the first part of it, I mean, yes, obviously, if the ball crosses the whole line, if the whole ball crosses the line, then it is what it is. It's a judgment call. And in this case, it's pretty obvious that Corey Rockwell, the AR, who is not a spring chicken, Corey Rockwell's been to World Cups. He's probably the best AR that the United States has ever produced. And I'm not saying that because he went to Georgia Tech. Rockwell is that good. Very clearly signaling corner. That's fine. That's not the rule of the land. Alan Kelly, the center referee, has the rule of the land. They take the throw in quickly, and there is confusion. Alan Kelly, after the match, in the pool reporting and the question, basically said that he overruled Rockwell's signal. So the signal part of it, look, Rockwell's signaling corner. That part's very clear. New York City players can't fall asleep in the moment. They have to react to what happens. That part's 100% as well. But Alan Kelly cannot create confusion, and I feel like he did. And look, the big thing that I have at this point with Alan Kelly is that this is not the first time we've had these issues with Alan Kelly in matches as of late. And Alan Kelly's been one of the best referees in this league for a long time. This one, I mean, you can justify it however you want. And if he verbally overruled Corey Rockwell, the AR, from...
It's a heck of a verbal.
It's a heck of a verbal from about 30 yards away, 40 yards away, middle of the field, over a loud crowd. If he's able to make sure that everybody understands that, and they obviously didn't, more power to him. I want to make my point clear because I think it gets lost sometimes. New York City has to react to the game that's being played. They give up the goal. They can't give that goal up. However, the referee can't create the confusion, and I feel like he did in this case. And I feel like all the comments afterwards are literally just trying to cover up and justify it. And that's frustrating because the referee can overrule the AR in that situation. I don't know what angle Alan Kelly is going to have from where he is about 25 to 30 yards off the end line and probably 40 yards or so away from the corner itself.
Yeah, at a 45-degree angle.
Yes, when Rockwell is making the signal a few feet from the end line on the touch line. I don't know who has the better angle there. I'm probably going to assume it's Rockwell. Because it's not a decision on whose throw or whose corner it is, and you're looking for the last touch. You're looking at where did it go out. Did it go out for a corner? Did it go out for a throw? That's a pretty shocking one to overrule from that angle. You have a worse angle. It's just there's no way to justify that you had a better angle. And to overrule it with a verbal and not stop play when there is obviously confusion about what the center referee is ruling, you can't justify any of those things. You can point out laws of the game to me, and I will agree that New York City has to do better in the moment. That doesn't make it okay for that confusion to be created by the center referee. Honestly, go back to the Seattle game where Danny Leyva chipped the goalkeeper, Zach McMath, from a long way away, and they bring it back for a foul in VAR on the goalkeeper, which is a horrible call, when what really should have happened and what Pro said should have happened is the whistle should have blown when the goalkeeper is down injured, because you don't want to see a team give up a goal because the goalkeeper's down injured. That was another Alan Kelly situation. So I don't know. The game management has just gotten really weird from him, and that's not a laws of the game issue. That's a individual referee issue. It feels like he's not managing these matches and handling these matches well at this point, and it's not just one time. So he created confusion here, period. That's what happened. And NYC has justification for feeling frustrated about it. They still shouldn't give up that goal that cheaply. You try to just blast the ball into the stands and then yell at the referee. But I don't like the call. And I don't like overruling the AR in that moment when you have a worse angle. So whole thing was a mess. And it's hard to say that it's anything but a mess. Laws of the game give the referee the opportunity to do what he did. I don't like the way he used them in this case. But it is what it is, and Red Bulls get the win in a weird fashion, not something you see every day. Let's take a break. Let's come back. We'll get into more Tuesday thoughts right after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Apollinsky and Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
You're listening to Soccer Down Here daily on SDH Networks, a division of OSG Sports. Find us at Soccer Down Here on Facebook and Twitter. The time is now the top of the hour. Peep, y'all.
Welcome back. Soccer Down Here, July 16th edition, Tuesday Thoughts edition. We're taking your thoughts on Twitter at Soccer Down Here, and we have a few to take right now.
That we do, and some of them have been carryover from the Thunderdome show from last night.
Sure.
And John Nason is wondering if PT's solid performances are contributing to Escobar's poor performances, considering that there's no outlet on the time, half the time on the right-hand side.
Man, I don't think so. You're not always looking to play straight down the line. So, honestly, that's a ball that Atlanta doesn't really play a ton. I don't think... Well, just going back to the question, I don't think Pitti playing well would be making Escobar play poorly. That part I disagree with. I think some of Escobar's issues in recent matches have been defensively that have nothing to do with Pitti Martinez. So, I'm not necessarily buying that, and that's not the number one option usually for Escobar in those moments. So, no, I don't think so. We've seen those two combine really, really well in the past, and I think Pitti's strong performances are a good thing. I don't think they're making anyone else play poorly. I'm not sure how to justify that.
And then the Colonel, among others, after the Bomba de Tenorio, want to know what you know about Mo Adams.
Joe Patrick nailed a lot of it in our interview with him. I like Mo Adams as a defensive midfielder, a little more of a destroyer. If you pair him up, you can pair him up with somebody who's going to be better on the ball, because that would be his drawback, is Mo Adams is not a strong ball-playing central midfielder. He's more of a true defensive midfielder. I think he gives you something that you don't have, and that could be effective in some of these matches. It could be a late sub. He could be a player who starts some matches against the right opposition, and he's a player that would take some of the defensive pressure off of guys like Nagbe and Heinemann, who are very strong on the ball. So he gives you a different element. I think also he's a very cost-effective element, and that's the number one thing that jumps out to me, is that he's a Generation Adidas guy. I don't know if he can slot into your open reserve roster spot. I think you have flexibility there because he's Generation Adidas, and you can put him there, or you can move somebody from your supplemental roster over there and put him in the supplemental. I think basically you can put him into the open spot you have, and not the one that you're going to create if Breck Shea goes on the season-ending injury list. So, if he's available, I don't know why Chicago hasn't gotten more out of him. That's been something that I've wondered about. So when a player like that pops up, a player that you feel like, man, this club should be getting more out of them than they are, and they're available and you can do something with it, that's a good thing, and you take advantage. And it doesn't sound like you're giving up a whole lot for him. We'll see when this deal gets announced, if Paul Tenorio is correct, what the terms are.
Cairo, hashtag Tuesday Thoughts, and Cairo's putting on his optimistic hat.
Okay.
Atlanta United is actually 3 wins away from a great season. 2 wins equals hashtag USOC 2019 trophy. 1 win equals hashtag Campeones Cup, and we know who Atlanta United will be facing in the Campeones Cup. 2 pieces of hardware in the case before going into the single elimination MLS Cup playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, Campeones Cup for me isn't as big of a deal. It'd be nice. It's a fun one. I don't think you necessarily sacrifice lineups in other matches around that for Campeones Cup. I think you do for Open Cup if you feel like that's a necessity, because you're a semifinal in Orlando away from hosting the final, which gives you a great opportunity to win that trophy. So Open Cup for me in the next month plus until the final is the top priority. Anything else like Campeones Cup is a bonus. You do have to think about positioning for the playoffs, and I think you have to start thinking about games like Seattle, as a difficult one, and games like Houston following it as a better opportunity for 3 points. I was a little surprised about the lineup as well with that in mind, but that's the way that Frank has been consistently doing it this season. Is he wants a coherent lineup, and he wants to build chemistry, and he wants to have this team play together. He doesn't want to make drastic changes on a regular basis. You might have to a little bit with the injuries and with the schedule that's coming up. And Houston is a really weird one because of the lack of depth at outside back now, with Escobar's suspension, with Breck Shea's injury, with Mikey Ambrose and a hamstring, where he might not be available for tomorrow. You're in a tough spot. You're in a tough spot. So how you handle it is going to be really, really interesting. If you go 3-5-2, if you go 3-4-3, if you change the shape a little bit, I'm very curious to see what Atlanta does tomorrow and what these lineup choices start looking like the rest of the way.
At True Blue Images, the blue SEA ATLian, you had mentioned yesterday how when you were looking at the match, you were getting a bunch of different people saying a bunch of different things about what they were looking at when Atlanta was in Seattle on the weekend. And the blue SEA ATLian says, I concur, was thinking I watched a different match than most Atlanta fans did. I saw it live. Seattle, 10 players on international duty. Seattle's good and at home. Good match, fair result with early injury, fatigue, and silly giveaways. The sky is falling narrative has me befuddled.
It was befuddling after that one for me because I don't think it's an awful result. I think the way you give up the point is awful, and that doesn't color the whole match. And that's what's frustrating for me right now when you look at the way this team is dropping points, and I think that is what's affecting some of that narrative. You look back the international break and the goals you've given up, and you've given up a lot. That's just a number one issue here. But the way you've given them up, when you start looking at it, that's why it's a little more complicated and a little more confusing.
It's different.
You've given up 4 goals on giveaways in your own half. That's not something this team has been known for ever, and definitely not this season where you've been a good possession team. You had the Nagbe giveaway for the first goal in Toronto. You had the Ambrose giveaway for the first goal against Red Bulls, and you had Gressel and LGP giveaways against Seattle that led to goals. Now, the Gressel giveaway, Raul Ruidiaz still had a lot to do, and he scored a great goal. The Ambrose giveaway, it's a nice combination to find Royer. Red Bulls take the lead there, or get the goal there. The Toronto one, it's a really fluky one because it's a Nagbe giveaway in his own half, and then the ball gets down the left to Schaffelberg. There's a deflection on the ball to Schaffelberg. There's a deflection on a tackle attempt on Schaffelberg. There's a deflection on the cross, but it falls to Endo, and he scores. Just a weird one, but it started with a giveaway. So that's 4 goals that have started with giveaways. That's not defensive lapses. That's giveaways. That's a different conversation. You give up 2 goals off set pieces. The really bad one to open the scoring in Chicago, and the one against Montreal, even though it's a long-range shot after a clearance and it's deflected in, and the long-range shot was going to go probably 10 yards wide. It's off of a so-so clearance on a corner. So that's 2 from set pieces. 2 from penalties. The Toronto penalty, didn't like the call. The Chicago penalty, it's a little fluky in that LGP is sliding, arms down, and the call happens. But that's 2 penalties. Okay, that's not defensive breakdowns either, although you could look at not so much the Toronto one as a defensive breakdown. The Chicago one, you could look at it a little bit more as a defensive breakdown, and we'll get to that in a second. You gave up 2 goals with 10 men against Chicago. I'd throw those out to a degree. Another one is a giveaway from Florentin Pogba after a good tackle from him, and he tries to do too much, gives it away. But it's 10 men. It's a different conversation. You gave up a counterattack after your own free kick against Chicago. That's the one that maybe is the most painful for me because you can't give up that goal the way you gave it up. It's a great counter. Still can't give it up. Couple goals from good attacking sequences, depending on how you look at it. The second goal from Red Bulls is a good sequence. The second goal for Toronto is a good sequence. Couple goals, depending on how you look at it, you could chalk up to breakdowns, miscommunication. And the second goal for Toronto is one of those where 2 central attackers, Robinson lets Pozuelo get behind him, and you can't do that. I don't know if it's a miscommunication, if Brad Kazan's not yelling loud enough to get their heads around it, if LGP is not saying who he has, if Robinson's not listening, not sure where the breakdown is, but too much space for Pozuelo, then the header deflects off of LGP, and that'll drive you crazy when you try to fix it. The second goal against New York, I think it's just a good goal. It's a sequence down the right side in the middle, good combination play, you get the defense stretched. Sometimes you're going to give up good goals, and it is a good goal. Third goal against Red Bulls, that's a complete breakdown for me. That's just a complete and utter breakdown in a moment that you can't have it. It's a lot of different kind of goals you're giving up. That's what makes it a difficult discussion about, well, the defense is bad. Well, it's not exactly, because they weren't bad earlier this season, but you're not dealing with these moments as well as you did. And the giveaways, it's the number one thing that jumps out. You know, when you have a giveaway in the first 30 seconds by Darlington Nagbe in Toronto, that has never happened before. The Ambrose giveaway against the Red Bulls, it's just sloppy play from Mikey where he's able to get pushed off the ball after a loose touch, and Red Bulls punish you. The goals in Seattle, I mean, the LGP giveaway, that's one that just doesn't happen from him. The Gressel one, we've seen that plays like that happen from Gressel, and it's a risky play where he's at in the field, and it doesn't pay off. And then Rui Diaz punishes you with a great goal. It's complicated defensively. It's not what you're seeing from some teams where it is just 10 goals allowed and 9 of them are just defensive breakdowns. It's not quite that simple when it comes to Atlanta. And that's one reason I'm not saying the sky is falling, but it is befuddling because some of these are coming, and more than anything for me, the giveaways from moments that are just not true to the character of this team.
How much of it can you contribute to tired legs, tired mind?
The giveaways you can, but the Toronto one, for example, you had an Open Cup match 8 days before. You know, you shouldn't have had that happen. So, okay, that one's just a weird one. The Red Bulls one, yeah, you're coming off of a midweek with Chicago that didn't go well. You're coming off of a run of games where you had midweek in Toronto, home against Montreal, midweek in Chicago, back home to face Red Bulls. The Ambrose giveaway, that's a little bit of a reach, I think, for tired legs and tired mind because he hadn't played since, well, he played in Chicago, but he hadn't played much before that. Maybe it's just a lack of sharpness. The Seattle ones, I don't know if there's really an excuse. The Gressel one, for example, he didn't play much against St. Louis in the midweek. The LGP one, it looked tired. That's the one for me that really, truly, it looked tired. It looked tired and sloppy. The others, it's moments from players that you don't necessarily expect them from.
Elliot Bevan on the Twitters, he says, it's not a bad year for Atlanta United with Frank and all. The baggage is that he got Atlanta into an Open Cup semifinal, and they're still in the running in the playoffs.
No, when you put it that way, it's not. What's interesting is that I'll be curious to see how people feel about the Open Cup when you get to that semifinal against Orlando. I think the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup hasn't earned the respect across the board of American soccer fans, and it's a shame. And I think part of it is teams haven't taken it seriously in years in the past. Some have, some haven't. It's been inconsistent. I think the scheduling hurts it at times. I think formatting of it definitely could be better. I'd like to see the MLS teams come in around earlier. That would broaden the appeal of the tournament. I think it would make it a bigger deal. But this is an opportunity for Atlanta to make the Open Cup a big deal. Because I think if Atlanta gets past Orlando, one, that match, it is a rivalry. You can put it as a lowercase r if that makes you feel better. But it's a game in the Open Cup that will have some extra spice to it. Then, if you get a final at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, if Atlanta advances, you're going to have a lot of people in the building. You're going to have a lot of eyeballs on it. You're probably going to set a new Open Cup attendance record. Big deal. And it's a trophy. And it's a CONCACAF Champions League spot. So you win that. I think it's hard to say that it's a failure as a year for Frank de Boer. I think it's really difficult to say that if you lift the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup. But the flip side is you get to this stage of the tournament, you don't win it, then you're going to look back and say, man, we put a lot of emphasis on this and we didn't get the job done. Then you have to pick yourself up and get something out of the league, and it puts more pressure on that part. You get the Open Cup trophy. It's not that you're playing with house money the rest of the way in the league, but it does take some of that pressure off and might just open things up a bit. And the team might get back to playing with a little bit more of that freedom. I honestly think some of that play is going to come back when you get Ezequiel Barco back into this team.
No doubt. Cairo, with Tuesday Thoughts this time, is saying that PT is the Atlanta United equivalent of Mesut Ozil. The pro-PT crowd will read a compliment, one of the most technical and accomplished players in the world. The anti-PT crowd will read a slight, incredibly frustrating, seemingly lazy, and ineffective.
That's a pretty good way to put it. I don't even know if it's a pro-pity, anti-pity. I think it's the way people look at the game in some ways, too. I love technical players. I love skilled players. I wish I had been a player like that. I was not. I was the scrappy, hardworking kind of player because I didn't have that in me. I had to use my brain more often than I could use talent and instinct that was, just handed down to me. So
Crafty.
I always wanted to be that. No, I mean, well, crafty could go either way. Like, I always wanted to be the player who could pull off that moment of magic. And the very rare times I did, I remember, because they didn't happen very often. So I love those kinds of players. I want to see more of those kinds of players. I think it's a reason I get so frustrated when you don't see persistent infringement yellow cards and you see talented players kicked out of games and then those sorts of things. So I'm going to gravitate more to those players. And, yeah, that might drive some people crazy because I do have belief that Pity Martinez will come good because of his talent. I had belief on Ezequiel Barco that he would come good because of his talent, because these are guys that you just don't come across every day. I also have faith that Andrew Carlton will come good because of his talent. He has talent. Now, he's still got to put some of the other pieces together, but he has talent, and he has talent that just you don't find every day. That doesn't guarantee you anything. It doesn't. It shouldn't. But you do cherish those players. I do anyway. I think other people who think about the game in that way do. There are other people who value other things more. And that's fine. Because look back through World Cup history at the way teams have played, and you will see teams that play great soccer and win, and you will see teams that play bad soccer and win, and you will see teams that play great soccer and lose, and you'll see teams that play bad soccer and lose. And good and bad is judged differently based off how you look at the game. That's what's so fascinating about it to me is I think now, you didn't have these discussions back in the 60s and 70s about the Chiefs. Everybody was still learning the game. You didn't have these discussions in the late 70s and early 80s about the Chiefs or the Generals, or into the 90s about the Ruckus, and then throughout about the Silverbacks, you didn't have as much of it because, one, it wasn't on this scale. Two, you didn't have the game, I think, as front and center, although it definitely did later on. But you didn't have discussions to this level about not just good, bad, but why good, why bad. What do you like about the way this player plays or the way this team plays, and what do you don't like about it? And I think people are now starting to look at how they feel about, I like how Arsenal plays because of this. I like how Real Madrid plays because of this. I respect how they defend. I like the way they attack. I like the freedom that they play with. I like the structure that this team plays with. It's gotten to a different level, and that's cool that people have different opinions. That's really good. It's going to be interesting to see over time what Atlanta United as a club is defined as, because I think right now that's still being written. You know, I mean, even Tata Martino's Atlanta United was not as cut and dried as I think people would make it out to be. Frank de Boer's Atlanta United is not as simple as it's made out to be either, and I don't think it's done being written either. I just don't think you're there yet. So what is it going to be in the long term? What is going to be valued in Atlanta? By the consensus, by the larger majority. Doesn't mean everybody will be on board with that. What is not going to be valued? You know, you look at a club like Barcelona, they have a definition of what is Barcelona and what is not. Tata Martino, for example, had a good year at Barcelona. Didn't lift a trophy, but had a good year. Team played well. But they didn't necessarily play like Barca to people. It's one reason why he wasn't beloved there. I don't know if you shouldn't have that point 3 years in, 2.5 years in Atlanta. It's going to take time. For Barcelona, it took them decades and decades and decades of just being a club until Johan Cruyff came in and started to give it a personality on the field. And then it got away from it. And then when he came back as a manager, he reinforced that personality. And then Pep Guardiola took it to another level. Now I think Barca has an identity that probably will be pretty long-lasting. So it's going to take time. But people do look at players and teams and styles in very different ways. And a lot of that's down to, you know, if you played, what you valued, if you grew up with a team, what you valued. And Atlanta United, I think it is still somewhat of a blank slate, although there are starting to be words put on that slate. But they don't all go together just yet. And that's okay.
Joey Logan, as a part of a discussion he was having last night with friend of the show, Michael Valverde. Atlanta United need a second striker after transferring Romario. Vasquez is okay, but not your number 2 long-term as of now. And a wingback. Bello's been hurt all year, no backup for Escobar. Parkey was a temporary fix. Pogba could be a solution.
Well, I mean, you've had the injuries on the outside that have added up, and it's not... Well, honestly, it is almost like Toronto last year at center back, but that was 2 positions, and this is 1 at left back, where you've had, you know, number 1 hurt, number 2 hurt, number 3 hurt for most of the year. Number 2 is now done, Breck Shea, it appears. We'll wait and get an update there, but it's not looking good. And that's just really hard to deal with. You've not had an option outside of Michael Parkhurst on the right side, and look, it's going to be hard to find somebody who does exactly what Franco Escobar does, but you'd like to get somebody a little closer to that, a little more range on the right side if you can. The Mo Adams acquisition, I want to see, one, what you give up for it. I think there's a little risk here, especially if you're not giving up a player, and it doesn't sound like you are, but we'll see. And I do think he gives you something you don't have. Second striker, I think you do have options there, because in a 3-5-2... And look, this team I don't think is going to play a lot of 2-striker. I don't think it's something you're going to prioritize. But if you need to do it, you do have Vasquez, who gives you a big body and size, and something that you don't have right now. You can also play Pitti or Barco as a second striker. Both can be effective in this type of system there. I think you could maybe even play Gressel there, although we haven't seen it. So you have options. I think it's a lower priority. I think now with the Shea injury and the Ambrose hamstring all at the same time, you might have to go find an outside back, or you're going to have to manufacture one. And I don't know how you manufacture it unless it's a Gordon Wild. I don't think you want to put Justin Merrim in that kind of role unless it's a wing back role, not an outside back role. Gressel can play a wing back role. That means you're going to 3 in the back, and that means you're making a decision between 3-4-3 and 3-5-2. It's not easy at the moment with these injuries. You're going to have to change up, I think, what the idea was that Frank de Boer came in with. And this has been an ongoing conversation for him all season. He came in and wanted to play 4-3-3. He couldn't without Franco Escobar. He didn't feel like he had another right back that could give you that, so he played 3 in the back. Didn't work as well. You went to 4 in the back. It worked better. The team was playing well. Now you've kind of lost that form, and you've had injuries on top of it, and you might have to go back to 3 in the back. And what can you do differently with 3 in the back than you did before in the 3-4-3? You could go 3-5-2. Gressel as a right wing back works. That would or could mean Escobar playing centrally, which is not his best, but might be the best way to make use of everything you have right now. But you don't have a left wing back, a true one. Gordon Wild, maybe. He's played it some. Wasn't all that convincing in it. Justin Merrim, it's a change for him. I think he's got the work rate. I think he could give it a go. Don't know how successful that would be. I don't like some of the possible solutions that are not really including wing backs, that are looking at it more as a 3 with 2 in front and then a line of 3 and 2 up top. That's incredibly risky. And I don't know if this team could succeed that way. So I think you have to look at it as wing backs, and on the left side, you just don't necessarily have that right now. The only other option, I mean, and it's a long shot, would be a player like Guillermo Benitez, who is with Atlanta United too, who is explosive going forward, but is inconsistent. He's a young player from Panama. He did play in the U20 World Cup and did have a good tournament. But you have to sign him to an MLS deal. And are you ready to do that yet? Has he shown enough to do that yet? And is it better to go that direction than to go find a player from outside that has been playing in a different manner? Don't know. It's going to be difficult right now, and it's going to be difficult tomorrow. That's the challenging part about it, is you've got to deal with just what you have available right now to get through tomorrow, which is a big game, and probably get through Sunday, which is a big game. You got 6 points on the table at home. You need to get 6 points at home. And you're going to have to take a chance in how you do that with the injuries that you're dealing with right now. So it won't be easy, and I'm fascinated to see what team comes out tomorrow night.
Herschel Skywalker adding a couple of names to the mix, saying that I'd like to see Atlanta United take a loan for some young American fullbacks, Shackmore or DeSevio Payne, and also the second team is Jack Metcalf, who could handle MLS as a stopgap, just spitballing.
Yeah, Metcalf is definitely a possibility. He's a player who can play a few different roles. I don't know if he can help you as a wing back at the MLS level. I think as an outside back, as a stopgap, yeah, you could go that direction, and you could probably get him on the minimum if you have that roster spot open, although we'll have to see where Mo Adams slots in if that deal gets done and what spot he takes. So that there's just complications with all of it. Getting a player on loan is not always easy, and you do have to think about where they fit cap-wise and how all that works, because some of these guys are on decently sized contracts. Not all, but some are. And it's not exactly easy to make it work financially. But those are two names, and Shaq Moore is one that, on the right side, and that's what's interesting about Shaq Moore, is he would be a right back. I don't think he beats out Franco Escobar in the long term. He's had a weird run at the club level over the years. He is in Spain. He is with a club. He's with Levante. He spent some time on loan at a smaller club in the third division in 2018. he hasn't played a lot consistently at the top level. He's only got 6 games in La Liga under his belt. He's got 9 in La Liga 2. He's got 4 in the Copa del Rey. He's got 50 in the 3rd division in Spain. If you're able to get him, and it looks like he is under contract. This is according to Transfermarkt. It's not exact. It's not the gospel, but looks like he's under contract through the rest of the upcoming season, so June 30, 2020. If you're able to get him on a loan with an option to buy, and he knows that he's coming in, maybe not to start, maybe it could work. I think value-wise, his deal at Levante probably could pull that off. Payne, I'll have to do a little bit of digging into on what his contract situation could look like. It's possible. It's harder, though. It's harder to get a guy on loan that's the right fit for this situation because you're looking for depth. If you're going to get a guy on loan, typically the club that is loaning them wants them to play and wants them to be a regular player. So it's hard to find a club that is willing to allow a guy to go on loan to be a depth piece. That's just not always an easy fit. But Moore coming to the end of his contract is a little bit different situation. And if Levante doesn't have plans for him, then maybe you can make something work.
Nathan Pugh with a rhetorical question.
Uh-oh.
When can the fan base have a come-to-Jesus meeting or a street brawl? And then below he has the Anchorman multi-station gif with Ben Stiller licking his chops in the handlebar mustache. To get over our immaturity, silly unconditional love of Tata, and poor attitude towards each other, exempli gratiami toward all supporters groups or supporters groups toward Doug, and just back the players and manager. Hashtag Tuesday Thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's all part of, I think, the process of all of this. So it's been more negative than I would have thought coming off of a championship. And it feels like after losses, everything just falls apart, and it does turn SEC football at times, or whatever other conference of college football. If you're not an SEC fan, I don't want to offend anyone. ACC for some. Other conferences are all appropriate as well, but I think we know in the SEC that if Alabama has a bad day, Paul Feinbaum show, you're going to have a lot of yelling the next day.
It just means more.
It just means more, and maybe it just means more here. But I don't know. I guess sometimes we get accused of not yelling enough, and that's okay. I don't want to do that. I'd like to actually talk about what's going on and why things are the way they are, as opposed to yelling about them, and try to accomplish that. Nobody's perfect. Nobody hits it 100% of the time. I know we don't. I'd never say that we do, but we try to give you a little bit more than that, and the reasons why things are, if we can, if we know them. Sometimes. And that's what's so inexplicable at times about this one lately, is sometimes there's not an easy explanation. Sometimes there's not, well, this player is bad and needs to go. Sometimes it's not that simple. The back line is terrible. It's just sometimes not that simple. And that's what Sunday felt like for me specifically with Seattle. Sorry, I'm watching Teise in Argentina, and there's a hit from...
Are they throwing things at each other again?
No, there's a hit from El Monumental talking about River Plate, and there is an old River Plate fan walking back and forth behind the person who is giving the hit with a Pity Martinez jersey, number 10, walking back and forth, showing it. Like, not wearing it, like holding it up. So, man, chaos. It's but that's soccer, you know. Like, that's kind of what the game is, and I do get the emotional reactions at the end of a game because I think it's an emotional game, and it can be difficult at times to quantify everything. I do wish people would stop attacking one another, and that's just in general. Like, I'm tired of the way people discuss things is to yell and scream and call people names, and if you don't agree with them 100%, then you're an idiot, and I only want to talk to people who agree with me 100%. I don't want to hear other things, and I don't want to listen, and I just want to yell. that's not even a soccer thing. That's just a life thing these days, and I'm very worn out by it. So I want to listen. I want to hear what people think, and I want to hear what people say. But can we stop some of the aggro about it and just give your opinion?
The aggro discourse?
Yes. Can it just be giving an opinion and disagreeing and agreeing and respecting people a little bit more? But, it's all good. We'll see what happens. Hopefully things don't get torn apart by more results. I would like to think that they won't. This team is not in last place. They are in a position in the East that you're 2 games in hand on the team in top, and you're 6 points back. Doesn't mean you're guaranteed
2 wins away from a trophy.
But you're there. Yeah, and that's a different conversation because some people don't consider that trophy at an important level. I do. It's not MLS Cup. It's not the Supporters Shield. It's the 3rd trophy. But it's a trophy, and it's an important trophy. And it's
it's a hemispherically important.
Yeah, you can
get you back and
say all you want to say. I'm not about that. I'm saying it's the 3rd trophy, and it's not the 1st trophy. And everybody looks at the 1st trophy because that's the one that you're defending right now. And right now, it's a long shot that you're going to defend it. Right now, today, July 16th. I don't think it is unreasonable to say that they will defend it. I don't think it is unreasonable to say that they will be in the Cup final. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that they'll be in the Eastern Conference final. Right now, they're not in that position. So there's work to do. But I don't see things to the point that, they can't be there. I disagree with that. And I also think that winning the Open Cup is a big, big opportunity, and you have to take it with both hands. So, look, we'll see what happens. There's a lot of soccer left to play in 2019, and there's a lot more emotions to have through the rest of 2019. And I'm sure we will have the whole full spectrum Roy G. Biv rainbow of emotions as this year goes on. Let's take a break, come back, more of your Tuesday thoughts, also some nuggets from around the soccer world right after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service Ad Council and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky & Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. SDH on a Tuesday. That means it is #Tuesday Thoughts. We've got plenty more thoughts to get into, but let's get into a couple news bits from around the world right now. Campeones Cup. We know who Atlanta United will be hosting. It's Club America. They defeated Tigres on penalties over the weekend in the Campeón de Campeones. It's an MLS event. Doug Robertson of the AJC tweeted yesterday that it is currently set to be in the smaller configuration at the Benz. Ticket sales could change that, but right now it is in the smaller configuration. And it will be sold out because Club America is Club America, and they are massive.
They're going to bring
and
folks.
They are huge, and there will be folks who are America fans, Águilas fans from all over the Southeast who will be descending upon Atlanta for that one. So it'll be a fun one. It'll be a fun atmosphere. It's a weird spot for the game in terms of the schedule for Atlanta United. It's not an easy spot for the Águilas either, so we'll see how both teams take it. Last year it felt kind of like an in-between serious game and exhibition, and I'd love to see it become a serious thing, but just where it falls in the calendar, it's kind of hard for it to be that right now. MLS confirmed that Zlatan Ibrahimovic will be able to play against LAFC in El Tráfico, and I'm with Bob Bradley. I don't like the name for it either. I think it's lame, but other people love it.
Then
so
Bob Bradley needs to come up with a better name.
It's a dumb name. Bob Bradley doesn't have to come up with another name. It's just a dumb name. Bob Bradley didn't name it. Why are you yelling at Bob Bradley?
Because he's the one who's complaining about it being a bad name.
It's a dumb name. Dumb. Dumb.
Then come up with a better name.
You can say it's a dumb name and just say it's a dumb name. It's just
I like El Tráfico.
It's the LA Classico, whatever you want to call it. I think El Tráfico's silly and gimmicky, but whatever. It's all good. Zlatan's playing in it. That's what matters. There was some confusion because people thought that a recent yellow card would suspend him for it. But his yellow card was wiped away in the altercation with Sean Johnson. Remember where the disciplinary committee suspended him for 2 games. That's the correct.
Him out.
What's that?
Where he choked him out.
No, he didn't choke him out. Don't exaggerate. He didn't choke him out. He like Vulcan death gripped him to the ground or something. It was dumb. It was a red card offense. It was not given a red card. It was given a yellow card. But the disciplinary committee, by suspending him for 2 games, takes away the yellow card because he was suspended. And that is the correct decision. That's the correct thing here. So there's a lot of black helicopters, and MLS is trying to make sure Zlatan plays in this. MLS's communication about the initial yellow card being wiped away was poor, but it is the right thing. It was handled correctly. Gustavo Bo, for the Argentine striker for New England, he is expected to make his debut tomorrow against Vancouver. He has gotten his P1 visa, and he's ready to go. Probably throw him straight into the lineup, and we'll see if the Revs can continue on the Bruce Arena train as they are trying to climb into the playoffs. DC's got an interesting dilemma. Luciano Acosta, no new contract yet. He's out of contract at the end of the season. Remember, he almost went to PSG. There was a great profile of him over at The Athletic and how much he wanted to go and how close he was and how much it's affected him. I don't think he's been as effective this year. He hasn't been awful, but he hasn't been the best 11 kind of player that we saw last year. According to Gianluca Di Marzio, he has interest from Sevilla, and he also has interest from clubs in China. DC's up against it with him. I don't know if they're going to get a new deal done. And if a club like Sevilla wanted him now to have him from the start of the season, if DC can get anything out of Sevilla, it might be the smart play because then they have time to go call Mr. Yamil Assad, who is out of contract, and you just have to sign to a new deal. It feels like a no-brainer at this point because I just don't think you're getting Acosta back for 2020. And if you can get something now and go get Assad, I think you have to do it.
Yeah.
San Jose is expected to sign Racing Club striker Andres Rios as the other Nugget and currently going. He's at Racing. He didn't play a lot. He's bounced around, played kind of all over the place. But most importantly, he played for Matias Almeida at River Plate earlier in his career. He's a 29-year-old striker who can play on the right side. It'd be a pretty good reinforcement to get for the Quakes right now, who are flying at the moment.
All right. So do you want to do fantasy or keep going Twitters?
Let's one more thing on the News Nuggets. You've got IFAB now to review the new penalty law for goalkeepers about keeping a foot on the line. After the Women's World Cup and all the craziness and nonsense and stuff, let's kind of refresh everybody here. The law was rewritten to allow goalkeepers to only have 1 foot on the line when the kick is taken. Before they had to have 2. Before they never had to. Rarely had to, let's say. Because referees just didn't call it. It just wasn't enforced. So they changed it to where it was 1 foot on the line. However, it was strictly enforced, and video assistant referees were used to enforce it. The Premier League is including VAR this season, but they have said that they will not use VAR to deal with this encroachment. They've also said that they will not use VAR to enforce it when it is close. They will leave that to the on-the-field side. But if it is egregious, then they will use VAR to enforce it if there is a clear and obvious mistake. So you're creating loopholes upon loopholes upon loopholes, and something silly will happen because it always does.
Of course.
IFAB has said that, and this is a spokesperson for IFAB, they told Sky Sports News, this law will be discussed at the next opportunity. We will look at it and discuss feedback from recent competitions where the new law was applied correctly. In Copa America, 8 penalties were saved. No penalty was retaken as goalkeepers kept at least 1 foot on the line. So it is important we review all the facts. That's a very important thing. And when you watched penalties that were saved at the Copa America, goalkeepers were keeping a foot on the line. I didn't feel like you had a situation, correct me if anybody remembers one differently, I didn't feel like there was one where the goalkeeper was shown to come off the line to make the save, but it wasn't brought back. You didn't have any that were retaken, and I don't think there was one that should have been. So was it just women goalkeepers in this tournament had issues with it, and maybe VAR was super stringent at times, or it happened in one tournament, it didn't happen in the other? I don't know. It's going to be interesting, but I think it comes down to it more so that it was just enforced, where previously it was rarely enforced with 2 feet on the line. So if you're going to rewrite it, I don't know how you rewrite it. I honestly just don't know how you rewrite it to say, well, you got to keep 1 foot on the line, but if you don't keep it on the line, it's got to be close to the line. If it's not close to the line, VAR will be involved. If it's close to the line, then it'll be down to the ARs to put their flag up if they feel like you came more than close to the line, off the line, and it's complicated. I don't think you can write a law that way.
That's a lot of writing.
I don't think any of that works.
Yeah, that's a lot to have to consider to be in play.
Yeah, I don't see that working out very well. Let's get into the fantasy update real quick before we finish off with everything from the Twitters. Jason Wright, make sure you're following him. Jason Wright, AGEN on Twitter. Jason Wright Agency on Facebook. Our sponsor of the Soccer Down Here Fantasy League. The Open League, top points, week 19. Not a big point kind of week.
No.
Check yourself is number 1 with 81 points. I like it. That's a new one. Home Sweet Soccer, 78 points. Don't Var Me Bro, 76 points.
Don't Var Me Bro.
Fall season rankings. Don't Var Me Bro is leading the way with 553. Check yourself is at 515. And Joseph Martinez uses the Oxford comma is at 497. In the Pro Rel League, in the Clausura portion of the season, you've got 4 managers who are undefeated at 4-0-0. Don't Var Me Bro, Cam Do Attitude, Black Hall Bombers, and Black Star FC. Here's your Week 20 tips, and we'll go through the schedule tomorrow and game by game and options. So, John, you've got time to put together your fantasy team, and then we'll have time to deconstruct it. But
there you go.
Here's your tips. You got Atlanta, Chicago, Columbus, D.C., Cincinnati, Houston, Revolution, Red Bulls, Orlando, Portland, Toronto, and Vancouver, all on double game weeks. Lots of wrinkles to it, though. And the commissioner gives you these tips. Look at picking against Houston and D.C. because they're both playing away games. They have 2 games, but they're both away. Red Bulls also playing away both games. They're at Toronto and at Orlando. That's a little different. Red Bulls are playing well right now, and I don't know if playing away affects them in the same way it affects a Houston, for example. I wouldn't touch a Houston player 2 games away. No. Red Bulls, you might find something there that not many others would pick, and that's what you're looking for to kind of create some separation. The commish says stay away from too much exposure with Chicago, Columbus, Portland, and Vancouver, which will all have their second match of the week against an opponent who didn't play in the midweek. I hate that it happens so often. It's so frustrating, but Chicago, Columbus, Portland, Vancouver all dealing with that in the weekend where they play a team that didn't play in the midweek. Commish also says even though he's only playing 1 game, Vela is still a must-consider. Others he'll be considering Alejandro Pozuelo, Diego Valeri, either of the Martinezes for Atlanta, and from Chicago, Calvo and Mihailovic. And he says, remember, it's not about how a player does on average, but how a player will do with 2 games in the week. Again, make sure you're following Jason Wright Agency on Facebook, Jason Wright AGEN on Twitter, representatives.countryfinancial.com/jason.wright, and you can find that link on either of the social media pages. Thanks to the commish for the update, and thanks to the commish for supporting the show and the Fantasy League.
That, all of the above,
and
choice
check
D.
yourself.
Check yourself. That's out there. So yeah, I have some decisions to be made by tomorrow.
You'll probably make the wrong ones.
This shocks you?
It's okay. We'll try to fix them.
All right, back on the Twitters, and Jason Heinley asks in ignorance the following question: when Barco returns, could we somehow convert Gressel to a fullback?
Maybe. The times he's played as a right back, I worry about him defensively because a fullback and a wingback are different and the responsibilities are different. He's looked better as a wingback than as an outside back. That's my concern with it. But you're at a stage where you might have to from time to time. If you're going to play 4 in the back and Escobar is unavailable, or you make a decision to bring Escobar inside for a game to play centrally, you're going to have to do something. So sometimes that happens in seasons, and it's those decisions that can turn the tide either way, because you have injuries happen, you have things break down, you have players who, for whatever reason, doesn't perform, and you've got to make a big, bold change. Gressel to a right back role is not as big of a bold of a change as you might have to make on the left side, where if you go 3-5-2 or you go 3-4-3 and you're looking for a left wing back and there is not an obvious solution, you might have to turn to a Justin Merrim or a Dion Pereira or a Gordon Wild or an Escobar on the left side. Something that is a bigger, bolder move, you might not have an option. And those are the ones that can sometimes flip things around. So Gressel as a fullback, I'm not 100% comfortable with it, and I don't think it's a necessity in the long term because of Escobar. But in the short term, on Wednesday, you might have to.
Chris Hutchison, is there anyone in the 2s who's ready to come in for defensive reinforcement?
Benitez would be the one that fills the need, and it's just a question of where you rate him. He's a player who can play as a left back. I think he's probably better off in MLS at this stage of his career as a wing back, where he's got more cover. But he's electric going forward. He's good on the ball. He's fast. He can stretch the game a bit. He's not George Bello, but he can give you some elements of what you wanted to see with Bello and why you value Bello. So there's definite possibilities there, but you'd have to sign him to an MLS deal, and it's just how you rate him. Jack Metcalf is just a steady veteran. I think he could definitely help you. I think his ceiling is lower, but in a moment like this, you might have to turn to him. those would be the two that I look at. Wesley Dacus is more complicated because he's on loan. He's not your player. You'd have to deal with the loan portion and deal with buying out the contract and then sign him to an MLS deal, which is all possible. It's all possible, but I'd say Benitez and or Metcalf are the two that you're probably looking at here if you turn to the twos.
Kurt McGirt, if he remembers correctly, 2011 is the last time an American team won a double without raising the cap or relaxing roster rules. Is there a chance we never see that again? Toronto won an MLS Cup and Supporter Shield, but had a far easier domestic trophy.
Actually, FC Dallas did a double in 2016, but they did the different double. They didn't do MLS Cup. They did Supporter Shield and U.S. Open Cup. They were in position to maybe do the treble, but the injury to Mauro Diaz at the very end of the regular season just wrecked them going into the postseason. They couldn't solve that. But they did the double. They just didn't do MLS Cup. It's tough. I mean, it's very tough. And with the Canadian Championship becoming more difficult now that you have the Canadian Premier League involved, I don't think the Canadian side of it will be as easy as it used to be. It's just not something that is easy to accomplish, especially in the MLS world of parity. So it's not something that's easily accomplished anywhere, but I think it's even more difficult to do here. And when you do it, that team deserves even more respect, in my opinion. That's why that Toronto 2017 team in the year they had, you have to respect it. You have to respect the way that they went about their business that year. The Dallas team the year before, the Galaxy teams that have done it. You have to respect it because it is that hard to do.
Coming off of last night's Thunderdome show, discussion this morning, host of Soccer Over There, Nick Alifi, said there's still time for everyone to get healthy and launch a zombie playoff run. Kevin from Charlotte isn't buying it. Quote, injuries, end quote, at this point. There's something deeper going on with Barco and Tito.
Is that a black helicopter right here? I think it is.
I wish we had that sound effect.
Yeah, we don't. Look, Barco made the trip to Seattle. He wasn't going to play, and he wasn't going to be part of the 18, but he made the trip to be part of the group. I think that means he's very, very close. Tito, I don't know the injury thing, but that's a bold jump to go that there's something more going on there. I just haven't seen it. So there's really nothing I can say about it. But Barco was in Seattle. I saw him. He was there. And he's close. And I would love it if he's available tomorrow. We'll find out because Frank DeBoer will be speaking to the media really any time coming up now. And make sure you're following our buddy Joe Patrick. Make sure you're following Doug Robertson, Chris Furmeister, Felipe Cardenas, all of the usual suspects who are on hand in Marietta for media availability. I'm double checking, and no, we don't see anything just yet. I'm sorry. Felipe Cardenas tweeted about Frank's comment about Houston. He said they have pace and good quality. They have a lot of South Americans. They put a lot of heart in it, and they're quite direct. They're a nice team to watch. So you're going to be getting some comments coming out of that. So maybe we'll get an update on Barco and Villalba. I know Barco was close. He's been working out. He's been training with the team, and he traveled to Seattle. I don't think Tito has been training with the team as of yet. I'm not sure how much he's doing on his own, but I don't think there's more to it. If there is, and I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, but I don't think there is.
Shiva, Frank DeBoer has said that he believes if players take care of their body and eat well and rest well, they can play every 3 or 4 days. That might be his philosophy, but I don't think it is a reasonable ask. I still feel with you being in CONCACAF Champions League and Open Cup, and there should have been more rotation at some point. Minutes and fatigue add up.
Where and how is the question. Early on you couldn't because you're trying to build something, and if you rotate in those early games, it's tougher to build it. Now, you didn't get the results in the MLS games early on, and it's easy to say now that, well, you didn't get results to begin with, so you should have just rotated, and then you're fresher for CONCACAF Champions League, and you just do it. Yeah, it's riskier, but sure, you could have. In the run of games in May, I don't know how much more you could have rotated. And I think the question comes down to how do you define rotation? Because for some, and some teams do this, and hey, LAFC got a result doing it in Houston on Friday. Some teams will just say, you know what, we're going to basically punt this game. We're going to play 8 different players or 9 different players. Some teams say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to rotate 3 guys in or 2 guys in and then give this guy a day off and then have this guy come off the bench. That's been more of the approach of DeBoer. I don't know. Seattle, for example. You decide you want to rotate more there. How and what is the problem? You could have played Mikey Ambrose at left back. Nope, he pulled a hamstring. You didn't want to play Michael Parkhurst, so I don't think you wanted to rotate LGP or Robinson. Pogba's injured. You didn't have Lorenowitz. I mean, you could have played Jeff in the Open Cup game instead of Miles or LGP or Remedi. You would not have had as strong of a team in an Open Cup quarterfinal. So I do get it in that regard, even though against Seattle that means players are going to go again because you don't have Lorenowitz. That's the only one, really. You know, you could have Dion Pereira for Merrim. I thought Merrim had a great day in Seattle, so I don't think you saw any effect there. Now, do you see an effect on Wednesday? That's the question. You can play every 3 to 4 days for a while. You can't do it over a whole season. That's why things aren't scheduled that way. You can do it for a while. Now, for Atlanta coming up, you're going to get into some questions because of the Open Cup. And that's where it gets very interesting because you're at home against LA Galaxy, you go to Orlando, you're back home against NYC, then you're at home for Campeones Cup, then you go to Portland. How do you prioritize? And I do think you're going to get to a point here soon where you're going to have to pick a little bit more than you have been just because of the number of games and, more importantly, because of the injuries and because of the absences. You're going to have more options in the attacking side soon with Barco and Villalba back. I hope you're going to have more options defensively, but that means you're going to have to get Pogba back. You're going to have to get Ambrose back. Maybe Bello. Hopefully Bello. But I don't know how much more you could have rotated. That's the problem, is maybe a player here, maybe a player there, but there really wasn't an option for massive, dramatic rotation outside of early in the season, which would have affected the continuity as you're trying to build something from scratch.
Which kind of lends us into the Ricky Ricardo question. Not that the team can take any games more important than the others, but with the Houston game being a true game in hand on Philly, they don't play midweek, and a 6-pointer against DC, which game has the more likely positive result for Atlanta?
Between the two, between Houston and DC?
Yeah.
Houston. I think Houston is a worse team on the road. I worry about them. They're going to, for Houston, it feels like a referendum game because they're in a more desperate situation, and how do they respond to it? Do they come out all guns blazing? Or do they come out sullen after losing to LAFC at home the way they did? They also have a lot of questions because Mauro Manotas has been the subject of transfer rumors with Cruz Azul. Albert Ellis has been the subject of transfer rumors in the past as well. Do they feel like it's the time to pull the trigger? Does a result, positive or negative, on Wednesday night change how they feel about pulling the trigger on those potential sales? It could. So Houston's a more unpredictable one in that regard, but when you look at the season, they've been bad on the road. DC is a team that's been more consistent on the road. DC is a tougher out than Houston is, in my opinion. And if you had to pick between the two, I think Houston's the better option here. But I think when you look at the next week, you have to go with your best lineup in each game. And maybe it's different against DC than it is Houston because of the schedule. But then you get not quite a full week, but you get days before you go to LA. And you're dealing with LAFC. So I don't think you're thinking about rotating at this point. It is who is the best player for that match, who's the best player in this day. And you're going to get some, I think, maybe you can call it rotation. I think it's more replacing a player who's tired. I think you might have that against DC just because players might not be able to turn around and go again after Houston. But some of that's going to be down to these injuries defensively that are going to make players have to go. And do you get somebody back against DC? I don't know. It's tough defensively, and that's my biggest thing about this next week is what is the back line going to look like? Is it going to be 4? Is it going to be 3 center backs? Is it going to be a 3-5-2? Is it going to be a 3-4-3? What's it going to look like because of these injuries? And I don't think there's an easy answer.
2 more before we go. Caleb Cook, on your injury thoughts. There's a lot of debate on what's wrong with the team, and as you know, I've not been the biggest fan of DeBoer, although after reading an article where he said he needed to change some things and adapt to players, I've been happier. But I think people are losing sight of the fact that injuries are really hurting us. It's not an excuse for some of the poor play, but it is something that I think people are completely disregarding as a reason for some of the struggles we're experiencing.
Yeah, and that's maybe the most frustrating thing that happens sometimes as we discuss this stuff is it gets to a point where it's like you can't say why something happened other than the coach is bad or the player's bad. And sometimes it's just not that simple. Honestly, sometimes there are things that affect it. Injuries have had an effect. Frank DeBoer has not had the 4-3-3 that he intended to have this season. He has not had it from day one because you didn't have Escobar in Costa Rica. You had Bello. You haven't had Bello since. You haven't been able to play the lineup you thought you'd be able to play. That's a huge issue. That's a huge issue. So how does DeBoer handle that? He's had to struggle at times. He tried 3 in the backs. He thought it'd give him more defensive security. It didn't really work. It's going to be interesting to see. So I think injuries have been in effect. I think the schedule has been in effect at times. I think the team has also dropped points that they should have picked up. Those things have all happened, and they're all related in some way, I think.
Bartimus Prime circling back to PT. And Gwen agrees with this being the last thought of the morning.
Yeah, Gwen has said this is the last one.
The silver lining of the PT problem, using the hashtag. Though he only has 2 goals and 5 assists, all of those have come since May. And he has only 1 goal, Gwen, and 2 assists since the break. Hashtag Tuesday Thoughts.
It's Gwen's going to make this very difficult. We have guests visiting at the moment. So let me try to make this quick. I think Pitti has played very well in the last couple of matches. I think against St. Louis and I thought against Seattle, he's had 2 of his better back-to-back performances. I think when you compare Pitti's output in goals and assists to a player like Julian Gressel, they're very, very similar. And that's something that has been kind of lost in the shuffle. Pitti, I thought, was very instrumental in some of the build-up play in Seattle. I thought he had some very good plays that led to chances or led to passes that then led to chances. I thought he switched the point of attack very well. I thought he played with confidence. I thought he worked hard. I thought it was good. He's been up and down this season. He's been inconsistent this season, and that's my biggest beef, and what you want to see change is more consistency, more influence on a regular basis, and more final product. You haven't seen enough. But as most things, and as I think, if you've heard me over the years talk about this stuff, I don't think he's been a complete disaster, as some would lead you to believe. I don't think he's been the player that we saw in the Copa Libertadores for River Plate last year. He's been somewhere in between, and it's shuffled on which half it's leaning towards. I think lately it's been leaning to the better half. But you need to see more to say that, okay, it's good. It's not there yet. You need to see more. And you need to see more, I think, from Pitti. I think you want to get Barco back. You want to get Gressel playing at a higher level that he's been at the past, and he hasn't been at consistently this year either. Justin Merrim has been back to that level that he's been at the past. You want to see those things continue to develop. You want to see it better. It's not where it should and can be. And I think Pitty's part of that, but he's not all of that. I hope that makes sense.
And that'll do, because I think Gwen called it.
Gwen has called it. She said that's enough. She said it's time for you to stop. She wants to go for a walk. She also wants to see what's going on outside.
Yes.
So I'm going to have to acquiesce to the wishes of the pup and call it a day. But we will be back tomorrow with a Wall Pass Wednesday and a match day edition of the show, where we'll be taking your questions about Atlanta and Houston and other matches going on tomorrow as well. We'll try to get John's fantasy team to be respectable. We'll try not to have him make some of the mistakes he made last week. We can only make recommendations. It is like we are Corey Rockwell, and we are
still upper
making
third as
a
always.
Signal with the flag, and we're trying to show what we saw and what we think, and it's down to John to be Alan Kelly and make the decision. He will probably overrule it. It's all good. It's all good. We'll see what happens. But thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks for all the feedback. Thanks for all the back and forth on the Twitters. We appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha Lexi, y'all.